GettingPositiveKarmaNow.com presents Bhagavad Gita for All, lectures by Nalan K. Narula, recorded in front of a live audience.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So in the last session we had completed the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and Sanjay had reported to Dhritarashtra that Arjuna was very averse to fighting his relatives and friends, and he was overcome with grief, and he cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on his chariot in a completely depressed and demoralized condition. So that is where we ended the session last time. So now we have chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, and basically this chapter is, you can say, a summary study of the entire contents of the Bhagavad Gita. So all the subject matters of the Bhagavad Gita are summarized in chapter 2. So this is a very important chapter. It gives you an overview in summarized form of all the topics and the details thereof, and the explanations, the relevant key points and explanations for the topics of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, Bhagavad Gita has basically 5 topics, and these are explained in detail throughout the narrative of Sri Krishna and the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. And the 5 things that are discussed are in fact the makeup of the entire universe. And these 5 things, their first is Ishvara, that is Krishna, the Supreme Lord. The second matter that is discussed is the Jiva entity, the living entity, who is the separated particle of Ishvara. And then there is Prakriti, nature of the divine, material nature and spiritual nature. So this bifurcates into 2. And then there is Kal, time. And the 5th thing is Karma, activity or karma, actions. And these things are all explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, out of all these 5 things, the only thing that is not eternal is karma. All the other 4 are absolutely eternal and for all time. The Ishwar is for all time. The living entity is for all time. The Prakriti or the material and spiritual natures both are for all time. And eternal time, of course, Kal, is eternal. This is about immortality, the nature of immortality, and the relationship between individuals and nature and the divine. So this is what we will be looking at in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So the first text of chapter 2, Sanjay speaks. He is reporting to Dhritarashtra. Tam tatha kripaya vistam ashrupurna kulekshanam vishidantam idam vakyam uvacha madhusudhana. Sanjay speaks and reports, Tam tatha kripaya vishtam, thus overwhelmed by compassion. Kripaya, compassion. Avishtam, overcome by. Ashrupurna, akul, Ashrupurna, eyes full of tears, Akul is depressed. Vishidantam, lamenting. Idam vakyam uvacha. Such words he spoke. Madhusudana, referring to Krishna. That Krishna saw Arjun was depressed, very sorrowful, full of compassion, and eyes full of tears. So then Krishna spoke to Arjun. Now this is the reporting of Sanjay. According to Sanjay, his take on the subject was that Arjun is full of compassion and very sorrowful, and his eyes are full of tears, and therefore Krishna spoke. Now, Sanjay's assessment that Arjun was full of compassion for the relatives may not be quite accurate, as we will discover. And lamentation and crying and the tears are basically being an illusion in the material sense, that ultimately one must have compassion for the path and the nature of the jiva, the eternal soul of the jiva. That is most important. According to Sanjay, this was Arjun's position, and seeing this, Krishna spoke. So we come to the second text, where Sri Bhagwan Vacha, Krishna speaks. Kutastva kashmalam idam vishame samupasthitam anarya jushtam asvargyam akirti karam Arjuna. Sri Bhagwan Vacha, Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, spoke. Kuta, where from? Kashmalam, this uncleanliness, this contamination, this dirt. Idam, this lamentation. Vishame, and this critical hour. Samupasthitam, where it has suddenly all these things have arrived. Anarya Jushtam. These are things by people, these are things that are done by people who do not know Anarya, the value of life. And Asvargyam, Akirti Karam. These do not lead to the higher planets, they do not take you to the heavenly planets or to a better lifestyle or a better life. Asvargyam. Akirti, infamous you will become. These are the cause of infamy. These are not attitudes that are befitting a person who knows the true value of life, who knows the true purpose of life. So basically, Sanjay's take on the subject that Arjuna is full of compassion and sorrow for the people, Krishna is absolutely cutting that. That this is actually illusory nonsense. This is not something that is desirable. It is just sentiment, which is not a good sentiment. It is weakening. It does not take you to a better place. It does not take you to a higher place. By sentiment, you think, by crying and being depressed and I'm so sorry for the others, that you are actually being a very good person. It is actually you're feeling sorry for yourself. So you may be feeling sorry for others, but he's also feeling sorry for himself, thinking I'm going to die. Because in the previous chapter he talked about so many times he referred to going to hell. So actually this compassion is born more of fear of consequences for himself than anybody else. Because ultimately the self, the person, oneself is most important to one. And it displays in different ways. So this is like show business in a way. So he has converted the compassion or the sorrow he's feeling for himself to apparent compassion for the others. Oh, poor fellows, they will die, And of course, we are going to hell. That was the unstated now, because he has already stated that numerous times in the previous conversation that he had with Krishna, that he's afraid of going to hell, that he'll be responsible for that and he will suffer all kinds of torments. And then he is also saying that the population will be destroyed, they will be misled, and it will become Varna Shankar, unwanted, uneducated, and committing all kinds of sinful activities and not being able to progress to their higher goal. So Krishna is cutting all this illusion. And then we come to text number 3. Klaibyam masmagama partha naitatvae upapadyate kshudram hridaye daurbalyam tyaktavottishtha parantapa. Klebyam, impotence, helplessness and impotence. Shrudram hriday, very small heart, no heart. Daurbalyam, weakness. Tyaktva, giving up. Uttishtha, get up. Parantapa, O chastiser of the enemies. Son of Pritha, he refers to him as Partha, which is son of Pritha. This is very significant. Who was Pritha? Do you know? Pritha was the sister of Vasudeva. That makes Arjuna and Krishna first cousins. They are cousins, brothers. Okay. So he's reminding Arjuna of his history and his relationship with Krishna, that you are my brother, and do not yield to this horrible, foul, degrading impotence that you are showing and this great weakness. Give up this weakness of heart and uttishtha. Get up. Parantapa, chastiser of enemies. Now when Arjuna was born, there was a divine voice that spoke and said that this child will destroy all enemies. No enemies will stand in front of him. Parantapa means one who gives a lot of heat and pain and trouble, in other words, punishment to the enemy. So you are a punisher of enemies. What are you doing sitting there and crying and weeping like a child who is ignorant? So Krishna is telling Arjuna, give up this so-called compassion of yours, which is nothing but pure sentiment, born out of fear for yourself, and in that you have neglected your duty, you've forgotten what your path is, you've forgotten how you should conduct yourself on that path. So, the first 3 shlokas of chapter 2, Krishna is removing, in a surgical operation, by his words, the masks of ignorance that Arjuna is filtering his perceptions through. How have these impurities, contaminations come upon you, Arjuna? You have lost all sense of what are the true values of life, the purpose of life, and that is not going to lead you to higher planets, but it is going to lead you to becoming most infamous as a coward, as a person who gave up his responsibilities and duties, and that is not good at all. And if you become impotent like this, through this weakness of heart, hriday durbalyam, weak heart. So what makes the heart weak? 2 things, fear and anger. So here we are talking about fear. There is no anger as such as yet, but there is fear of consequences, what will happen to me, what will happen to people that I kill, their families, the society, everything will go to hellish condition, and he is considering that to be far greater value than following his own duty. So Krishna tells him, get up, cousin, brother, you're my brother, remember who you are, remember what your divine course of action in life is meant to be. Chastiser of enemies. You cannot afford to become so weak. So this is all polluting consciousness. So rise. Give up this weakness. So that is where we will end today. And if you have any questions, I will endeavor to answer them.
So is that Arjuna was thinking from the lower chakras at this point?
Yeah, Arjuna was thinking from the fear chakras and the self-preservation of what he thought he might become disreputable. People would think that he is responsible for killing so many people and destroying the societal structure. If you remember in the first chapter, not only he is talking about the societal structure in society on earth, but he is talking about the ancestors also. That how the ancestral societal structure will be disrupted because there will be nobody left to serve them. Yes, you had a question.
So, my question is, sir, in Bhagavad Gita we see Lord Krishna who is basically guiding Arjuna, or
Right.
he is Sarthi for Arjuna. So, in our life, so can you guide us, like, what can we consider as a Sarthi, or what could be our guiding force all throughout?
The guiding force is the Bhagavad Gita. And the guiding force are the principles of Reiki that you have and the teachings that you have for the KQ force. These are your guiding principle energies. And you always can align your understanding with the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. That is the perfect guidebook. So what is there in the Bhagavad Gita, it is for all. It is not for some ancient time or for just some battlefield conversation, pep talk. It's not a pep talk. It's much more than a pep talk. So that should be your guide. And last time we had mentioned that chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita is what is discussing karma and action, which is very important because our karmic consequences depend on what we do. And ultimately, the consequences of our karma will get wiped out if we are acting in the akarma mode, which is the spiritual karma mode, which releases us from consequences of binding consequences of karma, basically. The spiritual activity, which you can do either if you are following a particular approved path, like for example a Brahminical path, following the Brahminical path, not just being born in a Brahmin family and not following, that is useless. It is just a show business. And if you are following as a healer, not saying I'm just a healer, but you're actually doing that, you're following the path, then you are liberating yourself and others who are connected to you through karmic bindings from material consequence karma. So that is a very great work that you are doing. So you may make mistakes, not a problem. But if you look into the Bhagavad Gita, that is the most perfect guidebook for you, for all of mankind. It is not limited to a geographical location, because these teachings are universally applicable everywhere. So follow the contents, follow the teachings, and you will find that the correlation between what you are doing as a healer, what you've been taught as a Reiki channel or as a KQ healer, are absolutely in alignment with what Sri Krishna is presenting to Arjuna. So in summarized form, just by the fact of doing your healing process, you are actually following the path of Bhagavad Gita. So gradually you will come to that point. As you develop and become mature in your healing, you will automatically start following the principles, because your inner guide will not permit you to act otherwise. But you should always get your course corrections from others, from other things. There is a triple process of triangulation in everything, as it is in spiritual life. Sadhu, Shastra, Acharya. Sadhu is the congregation of healers who are rightly placed. Sadhu means one who is rightly placed on the spiritual path. And Shastra is the scriptures, and in your case the summarized form in terms of your teaching, your manuals, the books that you have for your healing processes. And Acharya is the person who is living those principles and demonstrating, or the Guru basically. So you have to come in alignment with these three. So when you're in alignment with these three, it is very important to remain connected to the congregation, to the body of healers. You must develop personal relationships and helpful relationships, friendships, because you're all going on the same path, and if you're all going in your own separate path, isolated from others, you will not get the Sadhu, Shastra, Acharya triangulation, confirmation. So you will be very alone. So this alone is a difficult path. One cannot be alone forever or for a very long time. There has to be connectivity and a connection between others and you. How will you test your realizations? You will test your realizations by discussing with others, and in other words, treating them as guides. And we have taught you that you can always request Reiki to give you guidance through others. If you remember those teachings of ours, and that, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that they are like just broadcast devices to speak what you need to hear. You need to actually have a relationship with them. So you need to develop personal relationships of support groups within the sadhu community. So it's very, very important to be together with the healers, not be driven away by fear and anxiety and be controlled by just some misguided effort at controlling by fear. Fear is not what this path is about. Krishna is telling Arjuna, this is all rubbish, nonsense, this contamination. So people who are controlled by fear, or gurus who control others by fear, they are dirty. Krishna says, he uses the word dirty here. Kashmalam, dirtiness, contamination, filth, fear. Sri Bhagwan Vacha, Tva Kashmalam idam Vishami. In this hour of crisis, where has this impurity, this dirt, this contamination come from? This is all fear. So fear is not the key. Fear is not the way forward in spiritual life at all. It is very wrong to think that fear is going to take you to a place of fearlessness. That is absurd. You must shun those who are seeking to instill fear. You must shun those things. Because they are coming from impurities and not being able to see what is your true position, what is the position of others, and what is your relationship with the divine. These are very important subject matters. These are the subject matters of the Bhagavad Gita. Any other question? Yes.
So why is it then as human beings we are quite fearful, and also other human beings also realizes this is one factor which could be used to influence or control or maybe take an advantage in some situations?
We are fearful because we are ignorant. He is telling Arjun quite clearly that this is ignorance. Anarya, people who do not know the purpose of life. Not Aryan. Arya means a person who knows the purpose of life and who is going on that highest dharma of the purpose of life. Your purpose, eternal purpose of life is your Aryan purpose. So Anarya, non-Aryan, not having the purpose of life, not knowing, ignorant. So education is extremely important. To educate yourself, what is the purpose of life? What is the real goal? What is the evidence for it? What is the role of fear in my life? Fear is there to protect your physical self. That's all. To protect the body. When it extends into the psychological sphere, when you start having anxieties and fears about so many other things, it weakens you. It makes you helpless, like Arjuna is helpless. Fear is the only thing that can immobilize you. So Krishna knows this very well. So he is telling Arjuna, you're immobilized. You're depressed. Because he sees that Arjuna is Ashru Purna Akula, eyes full of tears, he is depressed. Vishidantam, lamenting. Arjuna is lamenting, sorrowful. What do we lament for? Some loss or some perceived loss. So Krishna is saying there is no loss. In fact, what you are thinking of being very compassionate, that is a loss. That is all illusion.
So how can we make ourselves completely fearless?
How to make yourself completely fearless is when you stay connected to the healing energies. What are the fears that you fear, actually? When you mention superstitions, what kind of superstitions and what kind of fears?
Like we are told that ये नहीं करेंगे तो ये हो जाएगा, like that superstitions.
Who is telling you this? ये नहीं करेंगे तो क्या हो जाएगा? Krishna says for a person who is on the spiritual path, there are no duties to be fulfilled, no demigods to be worshipped, no duties at all. Because his highest duty trumps everything else. For such a person, there is no duty except this. Whether you follow or you don't follow any ritualistic procedures is irrelevant and not going to make any difference to your life. When you are placed on this highest path, there is no need for you to do anything else. Because, why is there no need? That other section is called the Karma Kand section. Those are the prescribed duties for the general population. You do like this, you worship like this, and you must do that. Why? Those are efforts to connect you to the divine. Now, when you're already connected, what are you going there for? You've already passed kindergarten, you've gone through high school, you're, in your postgraduate, post-PhD situation. Why are you wanting to go back to kindergarten? Why are you wanting to go back to high school? You may have a reunion with people who are, not on the same path as you, not at the same place. But what does that tell you? You come away thinking, my God, was I like that? Rather than taking up their thing, I should be like that. So which is it? Should you lose all that and become like them? Or you should look at them and say, wow, I've made such great progress. And I wish I could help these people. And then the second part is, why don't you help those people to come to the same place where you are? Yes.
So, but how do you measure yourself in the sense that, as you said that they are probably in kindergarten and you are in postgraduate, but there should be some measuring criteria as to whether you have really grown up.
If you're in the postgraduate, obviously you've got admission there, so you must be qualified. Now, there are a lot of people who graduate and then they don't do anything with their qualifications. So the question is, are you doing anything with it? In other words, are you continuing to be connected to the divine through the divine forces, through the initiation, the Diksha process that has been given to you? Are you continuing your healing process? If you are, you're fine. There should be no confusion about that. If you are doing your healing, you're fine. As a first understanding. Secondary understanding is where you have reached in terms of your evolution as a spiritualist. Whether you are at the neophyte level, whether you are at the Madhyam Adhikari level or at the Uttam or the Paramahansa level. These are three different levels. So that will, be visible only according to your actions and to your understanding that drives your actions. So it's not at all complicated. Instead of worrying about, where I am, you should look at what is it that I need to do today to make my life better. To continue to go on the spiritual path, guiding my every move, no matter what obstacle I'm coming across, no matter what difficulty I'm coming across. I should channel healing to it. And it's not that everything is going to turn out in my favor the way I want it instantly. The point is that you're going to be able to navigate and negotiate these things. It is ultimately all about negotiating. You have choices. That's negotiation. You choose this versus that. Is this better? Is that better? You may make a bad choice. Fine. It's healable. A loss is loss. Write it off and move on. What is the big deal? Get on with your life. Don't let the past be an anchor dragging you down. When you focus on past things, when you focus on all these things that are dead and gone, the past is not changeable because it has already happened. But it can definitely change your present and your future by holding you tied up to the past. If you are going to sit there and analyze the past with a view of apportioning responsibility or liability, it's a different matter. If you are just meditating on the past and how bad your life was and how stuck you are and so sad, again it is the same weakness that is coming through. It is a contamination which will prevent you from moving forward on your path in life. So you're not moving forward in your path in life because the same way Arjuna was also not moving forward. He was also overcome, although Krishna is there with him. The divine himself is sitting with him as his charioteer, as his friend, as his brother, guiding him. But the problem is, so far Krishna is not being accepted as a guide. Later on that changes, but right now Arjuna is not looking at Krishna as his spiritual master or as somebody whose guidance he should accept. They're having a friendly conversation. So this part is a bit of a pep talk, according to Arjuna. And Krishna is always appropriate eternally in everything to the absolute degree. So this is not a pep talk. He's actually removing he's operating on Arjuna's ignorant eyes. Timarandasya Jnananjana Shlakya. He is giving him the ointment of truth on his eyes. So that is the qualification of Guru. Yes.
So, from what I understand, there are two parts to it. One is the knowledge and the other is the realization itself. I mean, you have read it, you probably know it. Unless and until you realize it, actually see that.
Rather than realizing, it is a matter of practice. That is why it is called sadhana. You must have the sadhan, the means to practice your path. The realization comes and goes. But if your path is clear, the practice is clear, if the rules for practice, the direction for practice is there is a formal structure. This is what you need to do. Then there is no issues. It's like a manual. You have your manuals, you have your operating systems, you have your operating manual. You don't need to understand everything instantly or all the time because you have a guidebook.
So, initially, probably it's not the right word, but I don't know better, but maybe it's faith, right? Initially, that if I follow this.
But it is not blind faith. It is faith coming out of realization and coming out of practical experience. It is experienced faith. It is not blind. Blind faith is very bad.
But realizations would come later, right? Once you have started following it, it's not necessary.
No. Please understand what I'm saying. See, leave that aside for a moment. Blind faith in anything is very bad. Because that is illusion. Now, faith that is born out of experience, some realization, becomes steady. Otherwise, it is flickering. So, flickering faith, blind faith, I don't know, maybe this is right, maybe I should try that, I will learn later. Yes, but the means are non-different from the ends, always. So, if you are going with fearful means, the ends are also going to be fearful. So, no fear. You must examine that way. If you are being led with fear, you will end up in a fear place only, nowhere else. If you are being led with light and wisdom and things that are made clear to you, you will end up in a clear place. If there is no clarity, there is mumbo jumbo and fancy words which at the end of it mean nothing, nobody understands what they mean, or at the end of it, it could mean anything. Though that is useless, that is just illusion, भ्रमित किया जा रहा है. If you look at so many languages that people are speaking and talking and all fancy words, they are hollow, they are empty, they are meaningless. People say we don't understand, and they are fooled by being told, oh, this is too high for you to understand. So meditate on it. So then you are caught up in that cycle of meditating on nonsense words, which are actually empty and meaningless. There is no such thing here. Neither we nor the Bhagavad Gita nor anybody here that we are presenting has that kind of obfuscation. So when there is the attempt to go towards clarity all the time, eventually clarity will prevail. But where there is fear all the time, eventually fear is going to prevail. So you get rid of that nonsense. Not difficult at all. Just have to understand the difference between fear and clarity. Where there is no clarity, you are going to be confused. Confused means fear. हमको पता ही नहीं इसका मतलब क्या है. We don't understand. Maybe it's too high for us. We are such fools. Yeah, fear. Then you become more depressed. Anarya. Do not know the purpose of life. So understand that these weaknesses keep us from our chosen path. And we get deviated from our chosen path because somebody tells you, oh, go this way, this detour is nicer. Let me take you down to the fear path instead of going down to the light path. And then you are telling people the fear path is actually the light. The big cheating business. So once you are free of that attachment to the darkness, to the fear, because fear is an old friend of yours, so very difficult to get completely rid of him. You want some fear. That's why you watch some horror movies, don't you? You want to be scared sometimes. Isn't it? Then say, oh, thank God it's not me. or it's only a movie, or it's only a tale. But then there's some lingering fear. So healing will fix that. Not to worry. Yes, last question.
Sir, very, very basic terms, can you guide us or explain us what is our purpose of life?
What is your purpose of life? What do you think is your purpose of life? Tell me.
I'll be very honest in admitting I'm confused.
Why? You are executing certain responsibilities. So is that not a purpose of life?
Yes, but at times I feel, is it the only purpose of life? Do I have it? That question's...
Yeah, so that means that you're looking for a higher purpose of life. There are lower purposes and there are higher purposes. It doesn't mean that the higher is better than the lower. It is that you have to consider the ultimate purpose of life in even the lower purposes that you are executing. You can't just say that I'll give up the lower purposes because they're low. No, they're not low, they're required. And what are your purposes of life ultimately? How would you sum up that when you're executing your responsibilities, what is it that you're actually doing? You're getting rid of your karmic debts. Your purpose of life is to get rid of every single karmic debt so that you can go back to your spiritual, pure spiritual life and position in the spiritual world. That is your purpose of life. So everything is geared for that. That is the Aryan path. Okay? Welcome. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
You've been listening to Bhagavad Gita for All, a lecture series by Nalan K. Narula. Explore our website, gettingpositivekarmanow.com, for more on how to change your karma and destiny.